Greetings, everyone. We've been on a journey together for many years on the road to social change. And look around you. These are some of our fellow travelers and all the folks that are at this conference. And along the way, we've deepened our understanding a great deal about what makes social change. I remember learning the myth of the social entrepreneur many years ago. It was of the lone hero or heroine who, against all odds, scaled mountains upon mountains to heal a piece of the world. In 2006, I got an award from the Skoll Foundation for social entrepreneurship. And when I went on stage to get my plaque, on one side of me was Robert Redford, and on the other side of me was Ben Kingsley, the Sundance Kid and Gandhi. I was a little guy from New Jersey. I felt an enormous amount of pressure. And along the way, we sort of realized, it's really not the lone individual. That person is living inside of organizations. They've created organizations. So maybe we need to scale the organizations. And so we did. And we said, well, organizations are important, but they're not enough. So we need to create networks. We need to create ecosystems of all sorts of collaborators working toward a common goal. We need to create movements across multiple geographies, across entire countries, across the world. Along the way, we brought many, many more people into our compelling visions. We learned how to tell stories to inspire millions of people. We created shining examples around the world where women and girls were being educated and empowered, where farmers were healing the earth from chemical poisoning, where people were treating forests and rivers and defending them as sacred living things, where corporations were embedding sustainability into their DNA, where the great turning toward wind and solar was happening, where democracy was growing and flourishing. We realized that if we could transform 1 acre of farming, we could transform 100,000 acres. If we were working in one country, we could scale that to 5 countries. If we were in 2 continents, we could go to 5 continents, 3 planets, 2 solar systems. Scale up, scale up. That was the motto. And along the way, we sometimes forgot to take care of ourselves. And many of us burnt out along the way because we weren't focusing on our well-being. And as we learned from each other and all the different issues we were working on, we began to weave together this beautiful tapestry to create the conditions for the thriving and health of everyone on the planet, where everyone had safe housing, clean food, healthy environment, education, access to health care, democratic forms, freedom from violence, and a healthy climate that sustained all of us. And we wove that into this amazing tapestry called the Sustainable Development Goals, a new dream for the earth. We've not been afraid to dream big. We've needed to. And we've also recognized more and more that we need to bring art and dance and poetry and song as essential ingredients into celebrating our kinship with each other and with all beings. And we've realized more recently that time is not linear. It's speeding up, it's accelerating, it's exponential, like our technologies are exponential. And so all of the distant threats we saw on the horizon have now come cascading down upon us. We thought we still had time to address the climate crisis. We still had time to undo generations of violence against women and girls. We still had time to change the essential business models of corporations. But now, all of those distant threats have come cascading down into a series of interlocking crises that we face today. Deforestation, water scarcity, food insecurity, fascism rising, COVID, democracy run amok, so that few individuals have more wealth than 4 billion people on the planet. And the climate crisis exacerbating all of those other problems. We no longer have the luxury of time to build the world that we have dreamed about. We have to do it now. We have to change the very mission of business to serve humanity, and not humanity to serve business. We need to create an economy where community health and community wealth and climate resilience are core operating principles. We need an economy that doesn't externalize harm to people or planet, that doesn't make people expendable. And we've recognized that we need to defend democracy everywhere we can, because dark forces are gathering on the web through massive misinformation campaigns and lots of funding. And we need to strengthen our own web of connections to fend off the most violent forces of American and international and global civilization. So what is the hero or heroine's journey at this exquisite moment of crisis? It means being conscious of the cataclysm that we stand on the precipice of. It means holding that collective trauma and still acting from a place of hope, solidarity, and collective healing. It means finding the deepest well springs of our inspiration, our creativity, our music, our song. It means centering ourselves with practices so we can hold the ocean of suffering that we bear witness to. And it means building a collaboration of so many different change makers and spirits around the world to learn from each other, to hold each other. On the journey to learn about ourselves, to make peace with our own selves and our families, with our communities, and with the planet. I grew up as a Jewish boy in the first generation after the Holocaust. The mantra in my community was, never forget that this happened, and never let it happen again. Never let people be made expendable at the altar of racism or nationalism or any ideology. I was traumatized by what I learned, what happened to Jews in Nazi Germany. I not only carried in my psyche, I carried in my cells. The body keeps the score with trauma, as it does with all of us. And as I've traveled around the world and met so many different people, I realized that trauma is existing all over the place, all over the world, in people, in communities, in families, in nations, in the world. Whether that's black people and indigenous people in my country suffering over 400 years of oppression and genocide, or people in Congo, or people in Somalia, or people in Cambodia, or people in the Basque region, or people all over the world. It's so important that we acknowledge that this trauma exists in all of us, in our histories, and that we resist those who try to erase them from history. It's important that we tell our stories to each other. And in the telling, we can grieve together. We can have solidarity. And we can have collective healing. When I got involved in the environmental and health and justice movement about 37 years ago, I had a chance to visit Bhopal, India, the scene where a Union Carbide pesticide factory exploded in one night, killing thousands of people as they slept in their beds and injuring 500,000 others. It was the Hiroshima of the chemical industry. 37 years later, that factory has still not been cleaned up. The children born to those people exposed have health impacts themselves. Dow Chemical bought Union Carbide, and they said, we got nothing to do with this. It's not our responsibility. Those are expendable people. And I had a chance to visit a place in my country in Louisiana called Cancer Alley, where 100 different factories daily poison black communities up and down the Mississippi River Delta. It's a national sacrifice zone for the fossil fuel and petrochemical industry. expendable people. And then I had a chance to visit Auschwitz in Poland, the ground zero for my people's collective trauma, where 2 million Jews and others were gassed and incinerated and starved to death in that living nightmare. And I learned something there that brought my intergenerational trauma and my life's work into searing alignment. Because as those prisoners were marched every day out of that concentration camp, as the prison band played under a sign that said, "Work sets you free," they were being marched down the road to build a petrochemical factory. So not only did the chemical companies profit from poisoning millions of people, but they also employed slave labor to build their factory. What kind of corporate culture finds that acceptable, finds that permissible? It's the same corporate culture that has lied for 30 years about the climate crisis so they could drill for more oil and frack for more gas and dig for more coal. We've lost a lot of time in that period, so that now the World Health Organization tells that 9 out of 10 people on the planet are breathing air that's not healthy for them. And UNICEF tells us that 1 billion children's lives are at risk in this lifetime because of the accelerating climate crisis. It's the same corporate culture that has chemically trespassed into every corner of this earth, including our bodies and the bodies of our children. And it's the same culture in governments that are supporting these companies and today are bombing not only Ukrainian cities, but their hospitals so people have nowhere to get help. We have to dismantle this culture to achieve the goals that we all dream about. 25 years ago, I learned that hospitals were polluting the very communities they were serving by burning toxic plastics in medical waste incinerators and breaking millions and millions of thermometers made of mercury around the world. And I thought, what hope do we have to have a healthy planet if the very sector of our economy that has healing as its mission is itself a major polluter? So I started an organization with others called Healthcare Without Harm. And the idea was to heal the healthcare sector, to kick its addiction to fossil fuels and toxic chemicals in industrial agriculture, to create a supply chain around the world where the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm is a core operating principle. And we've been building a movement inside of healthcare of doctors and nurses and community health workers who are becoming climate advocates and defending our rights and our children's rights to breathe clean air and to have clean water. I admit to being frightened by the news from around the world. I know my daughter is growing up in a world that's far, far more dangerous than I did growing up. But I take heart, and I feel so lifted up by all of you and all the people we work with that are here and around the world who are realizing that dream for the earth and healing the wounds of centuries. I'll end with a poem by Wendell Berry, a Kentucky farmer who helps us remember how important nature is to our own healing. When despair grows in me, and I wake at night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wooddrake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Thank you.